I learned the exact sound money makes when it disappears. It is quiet. It doesn't crash or scream. It slips away between ordinary days. I was 42 when I noticed the silence growing heavier. The house still stood. The lights still worked. The kids still laughed in their rooms. But something underneath had shifted. I woke early every morning before anyone else stirred. Habit, not discipline. I made coffee slowly, measuring grounds like it mattered. Numbers had begun to comfort me more than people. The spreadsheet lived open on my laptop. Income on one side, expenses on the other. The gap between them stared back without emotion. I closed the computer before my wife came downstairs. I didn't want her day starting with numbers. She already carried enough weight in her shoulders. We had been married 14 years. Long enough to stop narrating our thoughts aloud. Long enough to mistake familiarity for safety. Our suburb looked the same as always. Trim lawns. Identical driveways. Neighbors who waved but never lingered. From the outside, nothing suggested collapse. That made it worse. The kids came down for breakfast, arguing about cereal. Normal voices. Normal complaints. I studied them longer than necessary. They didn't know. That was the point. My wife moved through the kitchen efficiently. She avoided my eyes without realizing it. Or maybe she realized and chose not to engage. We had stopped talking about money months ago. Not because things improved, because every conversation ended with silence. I drove to work feeling older than the calendar allowed. Traffic moved slowly. The radio murmured without my attention. I kept thinking about a single unpaid invoice. At work, I performed competence like a language. Meetings. Decisions. Reassurance offered to others without hesitation. No one suspected I was counting grocery trips mentally. No one saw me rehearsing explanations I never used. The first real fracture appeared that evening. My wife sat across from me at the table. The kids were finishing homework nearby. She slid a folded paper toward me. Her movements were careful, deliberate. "It came today," she said quietly. I didn't need to ask what it was. The bank logo bled through the envelope. I nodded. That was my first mistake. Not anger, not fear, just acknowledgement. She waited for more. I didn't provide it. Later, after the kids slept, she stood by the sink. She didn't turn around when she spoke. "We can't keep pretending," she said. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. A defensive posture I pretended was comfort. "I'm handling it," I replied. That sentence had become a shield and a lie. She finally faced me. Her eyes were tired, not angry. That unsettled me more. "You're shutting me out," she said. I wanted to list facts, percentages, timelines, concrete plans that almost worked. Instead, I said nothing. Silence filled the kitchen again. The same silence I once trusted. She went to bed without another word. I stayed behind, staring at the counter. That night, sleep refused to come easily. Thoughts replayed in rigid loops. Bills, mortgage, college someday. Responsibility pressed into my chest like weight. I had always been the stable one, the reliable one, the man who didn't panic. My father taught me that fear solved nothing. Action did. But action required clarity, and clarity was slipping. The next week unfolded with quiet tension. Small disagreements surfaced unexpectedly. Laundry, groceries, gas usage. Nothing explosive. Everything cumulative. Our youngest asked why we whispered so much. My wife smiled too quickly. I avoided answering. One evening, a friend stopped by unexpectedly. Mark. We'd known each other since college. He sat on the porch, beer untouched. He noticed things quickly. "You okay?" he asked. I considered lying, then decided on partial truth. "Things are tight," I said. He nodded. Didn't offer advice immediately. That was new. "Money changes people," he said eventually. "Or it reveals them." I laughed once. It sounded wrong. After he left, my wife asked what we discussed. I summarized without detail. She didn't press. Another mistake. The night the power flickered, something inside me broke. Just briefly. Just enough to notice. I stood in the dark living room, listening. The house held its breath with me. I realized then how fragile everything felt. How much I had equated control with love. That realization scared me more than dead. I didn't know how to share fear. I only knew how to manage it alone. And alone, it was getting heavier. The power returned within minutes, but the feeling stayed. A low vibration beneath everything familiar. The next morning, my wife asked if we could talk. Not urgently, not emotionally, just deliberately. The kids were at school. The house was too clean. We sat at the table like strangers negotiating terms. She had prepared notes. That alone told me how far we'd drifted. "We need a plan," she said. "Together." I nodded again. That same instinct. She noticed this time. Her jaw tightened slightly. "I don't want agreement," she continued. "I want honesty." Honesty felt dangerous. Messy. Uncontrolled. I stared at the wood grain beneath my hands. Every line looked permanent. "I failed," I said finally. The word tasted unfamiliar. Heavy. Her shoulders dropped, just slightly. Not relief. Recognition. We talked for hours. Not productively. Not efficiently. But openly. I admitted how long I'd been hiding numbers. How fear had masqueraded as responsibility. She told me how invisible she'd felt. Like a dependent, not a partner. That hurt more than accusations would have. In the afternoon, we heard keys at the door. The kids came home early. The conversation ended abruptly. Not resolved, but exposed. Days passed. Awkward, but gentler. We tried budgeting together. The process was clumsy. Emotional. Disagreements surfaced quickly. Different priorities. Different definitions of security. She wanted flexibility. I wanted certainty. One evening, the argument escalated. Not loudly. sharply. "You don't trust me," she said. "I trust facts," I replied. She stared at me. "That's not the same thing." That night, I slept on the couch. Not out of punishment. Out of exhaustion. Lying there, I listened to the house breathe. The refrigerator hummed. Pipes shifted. I wondered when comfort became background noise. At work, pressure increased. Layoff rumors spread quietly. I doubled my effort. Volunteered for extra tasks. Stayed late. I told myself it was temporary. One afternoon, my manager closed his office door. He spoke carefully. "We're restructuring," he said. The word landed exactly where I feared. I drove home in silence, hands tight on the wheel. At a red light, I noticed my reflection. Older, tighter. I rehearsed explanations again. None felt sufficient. At home, my wife was helping with homework. Normalcy mocked me. After dinner, I asked her to sit with me. She sensed something immediately. When I told her, she didn't cry. She closed her eyes briefly. "How long?" she asked. 2 months, I said. We sat together without touching. Shared shock without drama. Later, she surprised me. "We'll figure it out," she said. No blame. No panic. That scared me more than anger would have. The following weeks tested us. Savings shrank. Pride evaporated. I took temporary work. Manual. Unfamiliar. Each paycheck felt smaller than my shame. One night, our oldest asked if we were okay. Really okay. I answered honestly. "Not entirely," I said. That truth changed something. They started helping more, without being asked. It humbled me. I noticed how my wife watched me now. Not critically, cautiously. Trust was no longer assumed. It had to be earned again. One evening, she asked something quietly. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I answered slower than usual. "Because I thought my job was to protect you." She nodded, then said, "By letting me stand beside you." That reframed everything. For the first time, I understood betrayal differently. Not infidelity, not lies alone, but absence during fear. That realization stayed with me. Weeks passed, but the tension never fully eased. Every minor disagreement now carried weight. Our children sensed it. They were careful with words, observing without asking questions. One Saturday, the neighbor, an older friend of our family, stopped by. She brought cookies, small gestures, familiar comfort. She noticed my strain immediately. "You're carrying more than you should," she said. Her eyes, patient but piercing. We talked quietly in the kitchen. I confessed my fears, my failures, my frustration. Her calm presence was unfamiliar, yet reassuring. That afternoon, my wife suggested we take the kids to the park. I resisted. Routine comfort felt foreign, but I agreed. Outside, I watched our children play. Their laughter echoed differently now. Hope flickered quietly. Later, at home, my wife asked me to review bills together. I sighed inwardly. Numbers always made me tense. She handed me the stack. "We can do this, together," she said. For the first time, I hesitated. Not from doubt, from fear of sincerity. I realized vulnerability was more exhausting than anger. We worked through the figures slowly, argued occasionally, compromised more than I expected. By evening, the house felt lighter. Not perfect, not resolved, but present. I noticed how my wife smiled differently now. Not relief, recognition of effort. One night, alone in my office, I revisited old emails. A friend from work suggested counseling. I resisted. Tradition and pride fought me, but I wrote down phone numbers. Small acknowledgement. In the following days, I felt less defensive. The world outside our home shifted, but inside, we moved slowly. One morning, the kids argued loudly over breakfast. I listened without raising my voice. My wife smiled. We were learning to endure together. That week, I attended a meeting about extra responsibilities at work. I realized I could no longer separate fear from life. Stress had to be shared, even if awkward. Back home, I suggested a small outing for the family. A museum nearby. I guided them through exhibits with careful attention. At one point, my wife held my hand lightly. Not pressing, not demanding, just acknowledgement. Our kids whispered questions quietly. I answered with more honesty than I intended. The neighbor called unexpectedly. She laughed at small, mundane events. We joined her for tea. We spoke about shared history, failures, growth. Her perspective gave clarity. Late at night, I sat alone, thinking about everything I had concealed, all the moments of fear and pride. I realized reconciliation wasn't a destination. It was a series of choices. Small, continuous, deliberate. Our home started feeling more like home. Not perfect. Not free from tension, but alive. One evening, my wife asked softly, "Are we really okay?" I paused. Not because of doubt, but because, okay, now carried weight. I answered honestly, "We're trying. That's enough." She nodded, and for the first time, I believed her understanding. A month later, the tension reached a subtle peak. Bills had been paid. Children's routines were stable. Yet, underlying stress lingered like a quiet hum. One evening, my wife suggested dinner outside. We chose a small local diner, familiar and dimly lit. The kids hesitated. They were cautious, watching us. I noticed small gestures, my son offering a seat, my daughter sliding her hand into mine. At the table, conversation felt deliberate. Each word measured, safe. I realized we were all learning how to speak without fear. Suddenly, my daughter asked about college savings. I tensed, instinctively. My wife gave me a small, encouraging nod. I explained openly, calmly. No anger, no lecture. Just facts and intentions. My son asked quietly about a summer camp. I smiled, genuinely. "I think we can make that work," I said. He grinned, relieved. Not triumphantly. Just recognition. Later, as we left the diner, the air smelled faintly of rain. The evening carried a softness I hadn't noticed in years. At home, the neighbors stopped by again. She chatted about trivial things. Yet, her presence reminded me that stability wasn't perfection. That night, my wife and I sat together on the couch. We didn't speak at first, just listened to the quiet hum of the city. Finally, she whispered, "We're surviving this." I laughed softly. Not a full release, not relief, but a crack in the armor. In the following week, we tackled household projects together. Repairs, organizing, planning, even the mundane felt meaningful. Children noticed. Their laughter returned, softer, more confident. I found myself listening more than instructing, responding rather than directing. One afternoon, I walked past my office window, saw my reflection, a man tired, worn, but present. The following weekend, we attempted a small family trip. A nearby lake. Quiet, serene. The kids explored, while my wife and I stood slightly apart. Not apart in distance, but in thought. Both processing, cautiously observing. As we drove home, the car was filled with minor chatter. A story from my daughter. A joke from my son. I smiled quietly. At home, the neighbor waved from across the street. I waved back. Small connections mattered now. Late that night, I reviewed our finances again. The weight felt lighter. Not gone, but manageable. I realized that control wasn't the answer. Presence was. Consistency. Effort. Our home was quieter, calmer, yet alive. A fragile balance of understanding, patience, and unspoken love. For the first time, I felt a cautious optimism. Not about perfection, not about life without stress, but about life with shared resilience. Spring arrived slowly, dragging colors into the suburban streets. The kids' laughter lingered longer now, echoing through familiar hallways. I noticed details I had ignored. The chipped paint in the kitchen, the small garden patch we never tended. One evening, I found my son fixing the old bike. He looked up as I approached. "Need a hand?" I asked. He hesitated, then nodded. Together, we adjusted the chain, tightened the brakes. No words of gratitude, no forced smiles, just quiet cooperation. It felt like reclaiming a part of us we had almost lost. Later, my daughter joined us, carrying a stack of homework. She asked for advice on a math problem. I guided her slowly, letting her lead. She laughed softly when she solved it. I smiled without pride, just contentment. My wife and I shared glances over the kitchen counter. No words needed. We were learning the rhythm of trust again. One afternoon, the family friend stopped by with groceries. We cooked together, chopping, stirring, tasting. The kitchen smelled of garlic and warmth. Conversations flowed naturally, no tension hanging over us. By evening, the sun cast golden light through the living room. I sat back in the armchair, watching my family move around the room. Moments that would have seemed trivial before now carried weight. They were proof of endurance, of small victories, of presence. Later that night, I walked through the garden. Flowers bloomed unexpectedly, stubbornly. I thought of the months behind us, how fragile we had been, how strong we had become together. I sent a short message to my brother, just checking in. A response came almost immediately. Simple words. Connection regained. The house felt lighter, breathable. Not perfect, but ours. We ate dinner that night without stress, without schedules. The children shared stories from school. My wife laughed at a joke I had made unintentionally. I laughed too, freely. Later, alone, I reflected on the journey. Financial struggles, emotional strain, small betrayals of trust, none had broken us. They had reshaped us, taught patience, empathy, and quiet resilience. I whispered into the night, "Tomorrow is another day. We'll handle it." The future remained uncertain. Life always would. But hope lingered. A subtle, persistent ember. I closed the window, listening to the distant city hum. Our family rested, together. Not perfect, not fully healed, but present. In that presence, I found peace. In a quiet assurance that even in struggle, connection could endure.